the drive. Tatum the finish. It is Banner 18. The mission demanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everybody? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with a Sunday Mailbag episode of You Got Boston. I'm here to talk about all things Celtics. This will be a regular weekly thing that I do throughout the year. Year-round is the intention, so figured why not start now? Why not start even in August when there's a little bit less to talk about? And I think there will be in the next few months a little bit less to talk about, but we'll still be here hanging out, hopefully giving you all an opportunity to get your questions answered. So I'll start off by just sharing some of the things that I definitely want to talk about today. And then we'll definitely have the opportunity to go through questions and answers regarding the Olympics, which I know are front of mind, regarding the Celtics offseason, which appears to be pretty much over. The Globe's Adam Himmelsbach talked with Brad Stevens this week. And so there's some good information from there. So we can talk a little bit about what we learned from that. Celtics Christmas game is on the schedule. So that's the only game right now that we actually have an opponent for. It's going to be the Philadelphia 76ers. So a little bit to chat about, a little bit to just kind of discuss as it relates to the team. And I think everybody's front of mind, most relevant thing right now is the Olympics. Jayson Tatum's whole role in that and how everything came to be. It was a little bit confusing. I think it was not necessarily the Olympic experience that he envisioned or that you all envisioned. And at the same time, Derrick White, Jrue Holiday, and Tatum combined to be the first players in NBA history to all three of them win an Olympic gold medal as teammates after winning an NBA championship. So that's pretty cool in its own right. So lots to talk about. I think moving forward, it'll be a little bit quieter until we actually have training camp, I think starting late next month, if not early October. No official dates on that yet. But in the meantime, I'll just get started as people join and just share a little bit of my initial observations from the Olympics and in particular kind of key takeaways as it relates to Jayson Tatum, Jrue Holiday, Derrick White, and their role in securing gold or lack thereof, I think at times as well. So I think the main thing that everybody's thinking about is Jayson Tatum's role as a superstar who was the number 2 scorer on the 2021 team that won gold in Tokyo. And now here you are 3 years later, expecting that Tatum will be, again, kind of a fixture of this team, a scorer. I think people expected and understood that he might not have the same role that he had with the 2021 team, just considering how much talent there was on this roster. But at the same time, there was certainly an understanding that this is a player that has been a key USA guy in the prime of his career, coming off a championship, all these accolades, the only American that was first team All-NBA. So I think people expected him to be in this position where he was still going to be a major contributor. And we saw early on with exhibition play, we saw early on with just from the beginning, it didn't seem like he was super comfortable in his role. It didn't seem like there was, really any clear fit, like this is what they need from him. This is what, he's checking in and this is kind of the shots that he's looking for. These are the spots that he's trying to get to. So it was a little awkward to watch and obviously, struggled with his shot throughout exhibition play. And then Olympic pool play begins. And during Olympic pool play games, you kind of had this moment of realization where you realize that he was barely in the rotation. I think the first Serbia pool play game was the first one where you realize that complete DNP as the game went on, it was becoming reality that he was not going to check in. And then obviously again against Serbia in the single elimination games in the semifinals, another DNP for Jayson Tatum. So that became the story of this Olympic team. And I think as time goes on and, I think the things that will be remembered is the Steph Curry, 3-point barrage and LeBron James's, greatness at his age and Kevin Durant and kind of all of those key pieces, Devin Booker, the role that he played. But it did feel like for a moment there, for a moment in time, there was this understanding that Jayson Tatum's play or, lack of play was like dominating the narratives. And he himself talked about this as he was kind of responding to questions after last night's game. Again, I'm not there on the ground, but I'll read the quote directly that he said. He said, it was a tough personal experience on the court, but I'm not going to make any decisions off emotions. If you ask me right now if I'm going to play in 2028, it's 4 years from now. I'd have to take time and think about it. So I'm not going to make any decisions based on how this experience was or how I feel individually. I keep trying to say I'm not trying to make it about me. I know that's the storyline the last few days, but we won. We won a gold medal, and that was most important. So that's the quote from Tatum. You hear it directly from him. There wasn't usual access to press conferences the way that there normally would be, where you weren't able to watch the entirety of people's comments, and I think that makes it hard from a reporting standpoint. Both not being on the ground and then also not being able to catch the exact vibe of exactly how things are said and what's said and all that, because I think at a certain point, like, quotes are one thing, but when you're actually at a presser, you can get a sense of, like, is this person agitated? Is this person genuinely not wanting to answer questions about themselves? Or are they just saying the PR politically correct thing? So I think all of that we didn't necessarily have an answer to. But that being said, I think with Tatum and this whole story, like, he said the right things. He said that, it was about winning a gold medal. I think multiple times he said it was humbling. One thing that he said in Adam's article is, I don't know exactly what it is yet. Something I can learn from. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but everything happens for a reason. And there's certain I can take, and sorry, I'm terrible at reading out loud. And I'm certain there's something I can take away from this. And that was what I was thinking, was that, he's going to have a different mentality about this regardless. Like, he's going to have an increased, a different viewpoint. In a way, I expect that he'll be maybe more, I don't want to say empathetic, but I'll have a better understanding of what it's like to be a bench player, like a Peyton Pritchard or a Sam Howell, that has to come in and play a very particular role, and hit shots after sitting on the bench, right, without having a rhythm. And so for me, like, this whole experience, that's kind of what I was thinking, was that he'll get that type of opportunity. But at the same time, he was in an even weirder spot because he wasn't even quite sure, like, what his role was. I don't think. Obviously, I'm not at practice. I don't necessarily know what Steve Kerr was telling him, but I think that it didn't look like, oh, he just has to come in and be a spot up shooter. Like, I don't know that he necessarily even realized what that role was going to be. And so with that, I think Tatum walks away from this Olympic experience being like the focal point of a big story that he probably wanted nothing to do with, and it's this big DNP story. And at the same time, like, I don't think any of this will matter. I see here someone saying in a week he'll realize he's a gold medalist forever. I think that's absolutely right. Like, in the long term, people are going to remember that he won 2 gold medals. He was a key part of one team, but he was not a key part of the other from an on-court standpoint. And at the same time, you have to consider the fact that he's also an NBA champion, and that's ultimately going to be most important. And so yeah, that's kind of my initial takeaways on that. I think a lot of people have asked me, are you really do you think Steve Kerr is an idiot? Like, should Tatum be speaking out publicly about this? And my thought on this is, I don't like blanket criticizing coaches just because I don't really know. Like, I like working with what I actually know, and I think that you're able to put the pieces together on coaches based on covering them and being around them for years. And definitely with Joe Mazzulla, I feel like I have a better sense of his strengths and weaknesses as a coach, but still a limited extent. With Steve Kerr, look, the main thing that we're seeing is his rotations, right? Like, we don't really know what they're running behind the scenes. Again, I'm not in Paris, so that makes it a little bit more difficult as well. But even if I were, it's still, you're still just seeing a very limited aspect of it. And it's just who's starting, who's subbing in, what do rotations look like. And I also cover the women's team, and the women's team also, I think I had a lot of questions about rotations and why is this player on the floor, not this player? Why is this the starting lineup? So it's really easy to sit at home and second guess coaching decisions. So as long as they win gold, you can't really criticize it, even though I think both teams probably shouldn't have been that close. But at the end of the day, you won gold, men's and women's. Like, you can't complain. And so my perspective was, I don't think Tatum needed to have a DNP. I felt like it was a little bit stubborn on Steve Kerr's part to, like, specifically play him 0 minutes, because you easily could have played him a couple of minutes. And I used to be like a huge Warriors fan. Not like I was always a Celtics fan growing up, but I loved watching the Warriors during, like, their golden days. And so I follow a lot of Warriors people closely, and I watch a lot of their games, and more so than the average NBA team. But I do see a lot of criticism around Steve Kerr's rotations and not necessarily playing guys that are playing well, and kind of stifling growth with some of the younger guys. I know, like the Jonathan Kumingas and Moses Moody's of the world. So it definitely feels like maybe it's not his biggest strength as a coach. I feel like maybe the personnel stuff is a little bit stronger, and you could tell that Steve Kerr was really just thinking about all this and trying to be professional about it and all that. So in any case, I think with Tatum, there's a lot to consider. There's a lot to think about. But at the same time, he's hopefully going to not be too rattled by this. And if nothing else, this will be an opportunity for him to move forward and kind of have a new experience under his belt. So that's my thinking. Feel free to ask any questions more about that in the chat. I think Jrue Holiday was one of the unsung heroes of this tournament, of this experience. So he's a guy that definitely stood out to me. I think people kind of take what he does for granted, but if you watch him defensively and kind of key in on him, he remains one of the most, impactful players out there. I think he played a similar role to like a Devin Booker type, where he was, doing everything, doing a little bit of everything, hitting open threes, playing really good defense, diving on the floor. And so, yeah, all of that I think was really fun to watch from a Celtics perspective. Derrick White, just the fact that he was even there was incredible after really not supposed to be, he wasn't initially named to the roster. Who knows if he'll ever get an opportunity like that again. And then obviously you have with Derrick White, the fact that he actually had some games where he was highly impactful. He had a 10-point outing. I think the last couple of games he was a non-factor and obviously didn't play in the last game. But even so, I think the fact that Derrick White was there and was on the team and was obviously a great locker room guy, we know that about him, hitting his open shots, playing really good defense. Like he was an important part of this team as well. So in any case, I think that those two guys being contributors is also a fun component. And I saw the Celtics posted that it's the first time ever that 3 players from the same team won an NBA championship and a gold medal the same year. So very cool, very fun to see. And to me, that was a highlight, just to be able to see them kind of continue their experience, continue their year. And yeah, so I'll leave it there on the playing time fiasco. I do think that it's just a really awkward situation when almost every guy not in the role that they're used to playing, not in the rotations they're used to playing. Some guys adapt better to that than others. Obviously, Devin Booker was a standout in the sense that he was able to adapt to that without like losing his scoring touch, scoring abilities. Other guys I think struggle more from having that reduced role. Same thing on the women's side. There are a couple of players that don't have to make any adjustments. I think Breanna Stewart and Asia Wilson are 2 of those players that have the same role they have on their WNBA teams, and then everybody else is uncomfortable. And so some people adjust that discomfort better than others, and some years it's easier depending on who else is out there with you. So this just wasn't Tatum's year for the Olympics. I think that's kind of what it has to come down to. I know that that's not going to help people. The thought pieces are going to want to say way more than that, and people are going to want to talk about how he, did his ranking in the NBA go down and all that. But I don't love that stuff. So I'm just going to stick with it as far as I don't think that he had a great role to play on this team. A lot of what he does was duplicative. Everybody else was playing really well, and he was in a little bit of a slump. So I think there was a lot to it. I still don't agree with the fact that he was completely DNP'd, especially when it became such a huge story. It's like, even just playing him for a few minutes, I don't think he's a liability at all. And I think there was a lot of things that he does well that would have actually helped against Serbia with rebounding and his length and everything. But again, I would love to know more from behind the scenes of what really happened there and the conversations that were had. And I'm sure we'll get more reporting. But yeah, we'll take a quick break and hear from our friends over at Game Time.
I love going to MLB games during the summer. I love going to concerts, games, sporting events, and there's no better way to get tickets to all of those events than the Game Time app. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. You can download the Game Time app, you can see any event that you search, you can put the location in, where you're based, see upcoming concerts, sporting events, whatnot, and get the best deals, best prices guaranteed. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. On top of the fact that it's already a really good deal, download the app, terms apply, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. With PrizePicks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 while watching Team USA rack up the gold medal this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup of players across basketball, soccer, tennis, golf, and more in as little as 60 seconds. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and you're locked in. So personally, I'm excited to watch Team USA compete in these next few games. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit matchup to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit matchup to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. I just realized that the closing ceremony is happening concurrently. So thanks everybody that is here live. I thought that was a little bit later. But moving forward to I wanted to answer some of the questions that are here. Question from Tom Coolidge about Steph Curry's performance. I tweeted out yesterday a question about what was his greatest performance, the performance against France for the gold medal, or the heater that he went on in Game 4 of the 2022 finals. I really want to say the France one. I think in a sense, the fact that it was on that stage, the entire world is watching. Like, I know people feel that way about the NBA Finals, but there's something about a gold medal game, especially where it was in the game, that felt even bigger to me, all on the heels of the game against Serbia. But it's hard to say. Game 4 of the finals, like, he doesn't have that heater. They lose that series, I think. I think it's pretty safe to say, although you never know. So those are probably going to be his 2 most legendary performances when it's all said and done and when his documentary is made, or one of his many documentaries is made. So in either case, yeah, they were both pretty impressive performances. I thought yesterday watching, and maybe I just enjoyed the performance yesterday a little bit more, but I thought yesterday watching just the way that he went off down the stretch there, 4 3-pointers in the final 2.5 minutes after not really doing a ton in yesterday's game. Like, I think he had a couple shots earlier on, but it wasn't like it was just really down the stretch that he took over. And especially what he did against Serbia, I think people are going to underrate that performance. 36 points, and they probably would have been down by 20 if he wasn't that hot early on in that game. So those are probably his top 2. There's probably other ones that I'm not thinking about right now, front of mind. I'm sure Warrior fans have like a million that are come on right away. But I think just the fact that he had never been in the Olympics, and at his age, it's probably going to be his only Olympic experience. And so the fact that he followed that up and actually had not just like he won a gold medal, but I thought he was going to be MVP. I mean, granted, he wasn't as consistent prior to the final 2 games, but just the fact that he was in that position to begin with was so impressive. And yeah, just capping off the desire to want to win an Olympic gold medal, to come there, lead that team, and then have the 2 games that he had. It couldn't be more storybook. And it was just, I think the whole country just enjoyed watching that, and all the fan bases that have been scorned by Steph Curry and the Warriors were able to kind of let that go and just enjoy him, playing basketball for the U.S. So really cool story. Really, really enjoyed that whole experience. I'm seeing some people here say Dubspan here. Now we have an appreciation for LeBron, Booker, and all other players, but obviously Curry was the one that stood out. I think that was one of the cool things, was that obviously there was some hate at certain points, and I do think Tatum got the brunt of that, and he tends to just get a lot of that stuff. Like, I think it's stupid, the whole crows, it's the whole idea that around Tatum, and the idea that like he's corny and all that. Like, I just find that stuff to be such boring dialogue. His personality is like, he's kind and he's nice, and he doesn't get, he's not controversial, and he treats everybody with respect. And I've watched him answer questions from reporters a million times about the same things, and he's never rude or anything. So I don't get why he gets this negative energy, but I do think for the most part it brought NBA teams and fandoms and communities together. This idea that, like, even if you weren't a Sun fan, or if you weren't a Lakers fan, like, you were still able to enjoy the greatness of those individual players. And so it was pretty cool to watch. I think, like, once people could get past like the desire to like blame Embiid for like earlier losses, or to blame Tatum's face on the bench, stuff like that. But I think for the most part, it was, the discourse was that people came together and just appreciated the fact that they were watching beautiful basketball. And so that was pretty awesome to me. And for me, like, just to be able to watch the Celtics play through the finals and then immediately have the Olympics start soon after, like, that's as good as it gets from a basketball standpoint. Comment here about Halliburton that he gave 100% on the bench. Yeah, I loved watching Halliburton. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the NBA. Just his energy and his just enthusiasm, and I mean, as far as on court, I think that he is going to be a star in this league. You know, if he's not already, as far as just his facilitating, I do think he can be a great shooter. So he's somebody that I'm sure will have his Olympic moments down the stretch. And a lot of people use Halliburton to point to like, okay, Halliburton was in a really positive, uplifting mood, and Tatum wasn't. And I don't think that that's a really fair comparison. Because I've watched both of those players quite a bit this year, and Halliburton is somebody that is really always like that. He just has this like silly, goofy energy about him, and Tatum is not. Tatum's pretty serious on the bench. He always kind of has that look on his face. I don't think that look necessarily means anything, but that's just kind of who he is. And so just on that principle alone, I don't think comparing Halliburton and Tatum makes a lot of sense. But the other thing that I was just wanted to point out is that like Halliburton's in a different stage in his career. He's younger. This is his first Olympic experience. There wasn't really a lot of expectation that he was going to be a contributor on this roster. So I think if Tatum was the last slot in this Olympic team and everybody expected him to ride the bench, it's pretty easy to just enjoy that and embrace it and relax. But if you know that every single second that you're sitting there on the bench, the cameras are on your face, everybody's tweeting about it, everybody's reaching out to you about it, the whole world's freaking out about it, like that only makes it harder to then get through. And so I think that's a little bit of why it's a little bit difficult to make that comparison. But I too thoroughly enjoyed watching Halliburton on the bench and just his celebrations and everything. And he tweeted out something hilarious after about like when you do nothing on the group project but still get an A on the project. So he definitely had the right attitude about this from the jump. And, I think maybe down the road, he'll have a larger role in an Olympic team. I mean, he made this team over like a Jalen Brunson, over a Kyrie Irving, over a Jaylen Brown. So like I think he was just happy to be there, just given the fact that he is younger and hasn't accomplished as much in his career, but still got that spot and was really good in FIBA last year. So that's certainly where that came from too. This is interesting. So somebody here said, thought Kerr's comments on Booker, Mike Weisberg said this, thought Kerr's comment on Booker were a bit of a meta jab at the commentary on Tatum. And so let me find the exact quote so we have it here as reference. But I can see how people might say that. But the context that I understood was that nobody had asked Steve Kerr about Devin Booker in this game. And so at the end of the press conference, he said, Devin Booker is an incredible basketball player. Nobody asked about him. He was our unsung MVP. I just wanted to say that. So having covered a lot of press conferences this past year, I think sometimes coaches do this when they feel like the media should have asked about somebody and they didn't, and they kind of want to have like, not like a mic drop moment, but a little bit of that. And so Devin Booker was phenomenal throughout this tournament. I think that he did go a little bit underrated just because he wasn't like one of the stars, but he got an A+ for the role that he played. And so I think Steve Kerr just wanted to give him his flowers. And I don't view that as a jab at Tatum because, you could say that about literally anybody. I think that he excelled in that role of like that star that became a role player. And more so than anybody else, more so than Anthony Edwards, more so than Tatum. I mean, Halliburton didn't get the opportunity, but like he just nailed that position. And so I think from Celtics fans' perspective, like people are seeing it from the lens of like, it's always about Tatum and it's always about Celtics and things. But I don't think that's what Steve Kerr had in mind when he said that. Who knows? Again, if you're there at the whole presser, you can get a feel for things a little bit better. But I know sometimes like people will ask about Tatum and Brown and pressers, and Joe Mazzulla will be like, that's not who you guys should have asked about. The first question should have been about Peyton Pritchard. Like that happened once in the playoffs. Like he was the unsung hero tonight. So sometimes they just want to make a point and they want to kind of signal the fact that role players matter too. And it's not just about the guys that hit all the shots down the stretch or went off, or kind of got all the limelight. And so I think it's a way for reporters, for coaches to kind of signal to reporters, like, you guys are missing a little bit of the story here. So we'll see, but that was kind of my interpretation on that. 2028, I do think that Eric Spoelstra will be the coach. That's what I understood from like very limited reporting, but that would be my guess. I don't think that Steve Kerr is planning on doing it right now again. And it does sound like Steve Kerr Eric Spoelstra is like the next guy up. I feel like all of America has tremendous respect for Eric Spoelstra and would love to see him be the primary coach. So I don't know if that will end up being the case, and I don't know how that will impact Jayson Tatum's desire to play on that team / how he would be used. I do think that Eric Spoelstra has a lot of respect for Tatum, but I also think Steve Kerr does as well. So I think it comes down more to who's on that roster rather than like what an individual coach thinks about Tatum. Like I don't think Steve Kerr thinks Tatum is a bad player. I do think that Steve Kerr thought that on this roster, like there wasn't much that Tatum could contribute in this moment in time that another player couldn't do better. And whether or not that's right is a different story, but I wouldn't view it as a sweeping generalization. That being said, I do expect that when the Warriors come to Boston, that man will be booed as loudly as anybody all year. So that'll be fun. Question here about Yabusele. So he made a joke about a return. He had a hell of a first half. Him and Keita could be fun with the white boys. So Yabusele is somebody that so I was at Summer League, right? And I watched all the games and I watched a lot of Celtics games, but also other teams. And there are so many players at Summer League that just look so bad. Like, I hate to say that, but they don't look ready at all. A lot of them are on two-way. Some of them even have guaranteed contract spots. And you're watching these guys, and like the whole time I was watching, I was like, there just has to be better players out there that are not in Vegas right now. And then you watch the Olympics and you watch some of these international stars and you're like, okay, that's where they are. I guarantee you that if Yabusele was in Vegas and he was playing in the competition that I watched across the board, and I'm not talking just about Celtics players, just across the board, he would dominate. And so I think there's a question to be said of like, once you go overseas, it's really hard to come back. I interviewed Jared Sonder about this before the season. He is a star in China now, and he's been a star for the last couple of years. And it's kind of like you can either be one of those guys that hangs around and tries to get two ways and tries to stay in the league and sign, veteran minimums and or be in the G League or whatnot, like what Tony Snell's doing, somebody that's like, he's just committed to having another year in the NBA. Or you can kind of be like, I'm going to go play overseas and I'm going to be a star and make a lot of money and travel and be like highly respected, highly regarded. So to me, this is like the category that he falls under. That being said, Gary Washburn of the Globe reported that he recognized him, from when he was a Celtic, and that he actually asked him, he told him like, tell Brad I want to come back or something like that. He tweeted out today something Yabu did about just wanting to get another chance. The exact quote was, I can't find it, but in any case, I think that he is somebody that will probably get looked at right now. I don't know if he'll actually get picked up. Celtics only have one roster spot open. Brad Stevens, in his sit down with Adam Himmelsbach, said that I think he wants to keep it open. That's the understanding that I had from talking to him at Vegas as well. So I don't foresee that they're going to sign anybody, but it certainly is interesting to see someone like him that just looks like he's holding up great around against NBA stars, against the top NBA post players, best post players in the world. You have to imagine he can help a team, right? So we'll see, but I think he does fall in that category of guys that like just wasn't going to hang around for years and try to make it work. And I totally get that. I feel like I probably, if I were in their position, that I just want to go get overseas and be a star and enjoy my life and not play in the G League for 3 years. You see guys like JD Davison, who's in his third year now of being a two-way, like that's a grind. And not everybody wants to do that. And so I don't think there's a right answer, but that's probably part of why we haven't seen him, because he certainly looks like he'd be ready to help somebody at least. Yeah, and he does look a little bit different. So that also stands out. So feel free to write if you have any other questions. Otherwise, the only thing I was going to mention was obviously Svi Mykhailiuk signed a 4-year contract with the Utah Jazz. I did not see that coming. I talked to people at Summer League that people were under the impression that he was maybe going to go overseas. Obviously, he's from overseas, and he would have a lot of interest in Europe and playing there, but no, he stays in the NBA and he gets a $15 million deal. Still unclear how much of that is guaranteed, but really impressive and really interesting. And the fact that he got that deal after pretty much riding the bench all year is fascinating. So I was super happy to see that for him. Everything that we heard about him, everything that I experienced firsthand, he seemed like a great guy. Jack Simone from Celtics blog reported that he was playing the role of Luka in practice during the finals. So he was actually playing in that position and being Luka and doing a great job at that too. So he doesn't lack talent, that's for sure. And just watching him in warmups, he can consistently shoot. He was one of the most consistent shooters in warmups. I think he shot a pretty consistent figure, around 37% in limited minutes and limited attempts during the year. So yeah, that was, I didn't see it coming just because I feel like if you didn't play at all, it's hard to get anything other than a minimum. but he got something bigger than a minimum. He gets a longer-term deal. It also highlights the fact that a lot of these players that were on the Celtics that returned, Xavier Tillman, Neemias Queta, those are guys that were all in this position where they certainly could have gotten more money. And I don't know for a fact that that's the case, but I know for some of them that is the case. I know Luke Cornett is one that did definitively get a bigger offer elsewhere. So yeah, Svi gets his bigger role. He wasn't going to have it on the Celtics, especially with him drafting Baylor Shireman, who's a little bit duplicative. But it did stand out to me because when I asked Brad Stevens about O'Shea Brissett actually getting the 15th roster spot, the first thing that he said was, and Svi. Like, Svi is also a great NBA player and he'll find a spot as well. So that was cool to see. That's it for me, I believe. Other things that I have coming up is that there's two different events, one with Sam Hauser and one with O'Shea Brissett this week at like signings. They're both at Dynasty Sports. I'll be tweeting out like exactly where those are, but I'll be at both of those covering those events. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to Sam Hauser and get a chance to talk to O'Shea Brissett. Maybe we can get a little bit of an O'Shea Brissett free agency update if he has anything to say there. I know he's been keeping people somewhat posted on his vlog. Sam Hauser will reflect on how his summer's going. So we'll have content and updates coming from both of those conversations. And then we hit kind of a slow period. So it'll just be a couple weeks off. If there are people that you would like to see on here, media members, former players, people that you just would love to have interviews of, this is the time. So feel free to message me on Twitter. Let me know if you want me to interview them. I'm going to have my dad on next week. He was a professional basketball player overseas for a while, a long time, almost 20 years. And he's a big reason why I got involved in this work. So going to have him on to just talk about the Celtics and NBA. We'll see how he does. You guys can let me know if you'd like him on. But he'll be my first guest, I believe. So with that, please do subscribe on all platforms. You can follow me on Twitter, Noa Dalzell, but really do subscribe on YouTube, both on my personal channel, which is You Got Boston Podcast, and also on Celtics All Access, CLNS, Celtics CLNS Media. You can find this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So I'm assuming most of you are not going to be listening to this live. So please do subscribe there. You can give me a 5-star review rating, like, comment, all that stuff really helps. It's not the best time of year to start a podcast just because it's August and most people are on to other sports or other things. But I do appreciate the fact that there are a lot of listeners and a lot of fans that want year-round coverage. So figured I'd get started in the summer while people are on break, and then we'll have much better insight during the year as we go behind the scenes from practices, games, on the road. I'm going to be at most of the road games this year as well, so I'll have coverage from literally almost everything that you can imagine. So thoroughly appreciate everybody for tuning in live. I know it's literally during the Olympic ceremony, so that was poor planning on my end. I did not make that connection prior to until someone put that in the chat. So I will be tuning into that momentarily. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your weekend, end of Sunday here. And yeah, we'll be back later this week.